Hey y'all, glad you're here. Today we're touching on a subject that's probably more widespread than most of us would think, and that is grace is not a gadget. Back in the day, way back in the day, there was a very popular TV show called Batman based on the comic book character. And in addition to Batman and his trusty sidekick Robin being able to fight their way out of every situation imaginable with a bam and a pow, Batman had a utility belt full of gadgets designed to meet exact needs in every circumstance. And back then, every little boy, most likely some little girls too, wanted a utility belt. As church folk, we hear a lot of talk on the idea of walking in grace. This catchphrase generally comes with a suggestion of the believer being able to call upon grace at will, pulling it Batman style from his or her spiritual utility belt to impact the outcome of our circumstances, whether it's life throwing riddles at us or just some joker trying to make me lay down my religion for a couple of minutes. However, there is a theological problem with this notion. By definition, grace is the unmerited favor of God. Put another way, grace is good extended by God to a people who don't deserve it. So if there's nothing we can do ourselves to earn God's favor, that is to access the spiritual utility belt, how then can we intentionally call down grace to walk in? How can we choose something that we have no ability to choose? The answer is that as a practical matter, we can only walk in grace when we run into it, after it's already been extended to us at God's discretion. In chapter 11 of the New Testament book of John, a familiar story plays out. A man from Bethany named Lazarus had taken sick, and it really wasn't looking good for him at all. His sisters, Mary and Martha, sent a message to Jesus in another town that his friend Lazarus was very sick. And after receiving this information, Jesus waited 2 days before heading to Bethany to see about Lazarus because, as he told his disciples, Lazarus' illness was not for his death. It was for God's glory. When Jesus got to Bethany, Mary and Martha were really angry with him because while Jesus had delayed his coming, Lazarus had died. Now, I don't know if you see what happened here. By expressing their anger with Jesus, the sisters were showing us that they expected that they could call on the Son of God for grace and that it would be delivered, to meet their need because they asked for it. But remember, Jesus said Lazarus' situation and his solution were for God's glory. Contrary to some popular church teachings, we cannot have an expectation of grace. That just messed somebody up. Perhaps it's this mindset of expectation and entitlement that has many believers confused and frustrated at statements like that. God's grace in our lives is never a given, and it should never be taken for granted. God's grace should be a beautiful, thrilling surprise every time he chooses to give it to us. A surprise that drops us to our knees like finding a $20 bill on the street right in the middle of panicking about how our family's going to be fed that day. So walk gratefully and humbly in that last breath he gave you. Cherish that last beat your heart just took by God's grace. Give thanks for this very moment of life you were just granted, not because of your expectation, but because of God's amazing grace. Thank God daily for his grace. Then, if he puts some stuff in your utility belt for that day that you can use, well, that's just gravy, baby. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's our hope that you heard God's voice today and that you'll join us again next time. In the meantime, you can visit us online at christcovenantfellowship.org and on social media. May God continue to bless you and yours greatly. And we'll see you again next week. Take care.